Senator, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Greta.
It's been a long time, actually, since we've spoken.
It is indeed.
Tonight's a big night, the State of the Union, and I want to ask you about President Biden first, because he's rather remote to the media. He doesn't do many interviews. We only see him when he comes out and does speeches like this. Have you, though, in the last 6 months, had any interaction with him?
Yes, but very casual. Not really an opportunity to see him speak at length on a policy matter. But I think the reason that he only does events like this is he's just not. I think the questions that people raise about him are valid. I just think he's, when he gets out in front of people and he has to interact in a way that shows some grasp of issues and that sort of thing, I think people come away going, this guy doesn't have it.
Well, you served with him in the U.S. Senate before he became vice president. Look, we all age. We all get a little bit older, a little bit slower. Is there any reason for you to have any sort of suspicion that this is a legitimate issue for people to be concerned about?
Well, I think if you look at what people believe, and certainly the polls bear this out, they think it's an issue, and by huge numbers. 75, 80% in most polls. And I think it is. If you look at him just physically, his mobility, his speech, all those sorts of things, he's a guy who's showing his age. And, people have to make their own evaluation about that. If they like his policies enough, maybe they're willing to overlook that. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of Americans are wondering, okay, is this person capable of filling the highest office in the land, and especially for another 4 years under what are going to be some very difficult circumstances?
Big issue this year is that now apparently every state has become a border state. What happened to the bipartisan deal?
It kind of fell apart, mainly because, you have to keep people's expectations realistic. You're talking about a Democrat Senate and a Democrat president. So the White House was involved in negotiations, as were the Democrats. And I think that our negotiators pushed them as far as they could and frankly got something that was way better than what we have today. But it didn't go far enough to satisfy a lot of our members. And so, and frankly, it is true. The president has all the authorities that he needed. We proved that when Trump was president. He put policies in place that controlled the southern border, or at least got operational control of it. And Biden could have continued those, but he opted not to. He did away with them all, reversed all those policies, and you can see the result. It's 3.3, or I should say 9 million people over 3 years, so about 3 million a year.
When you say way better, though, the border was still going to be unsealed. And people have a legitimate concern because we see what's going on across the country. And I don't want to pick on a few instances of crime, by people who are here illegally, but it's hard to miss the fact that we don't know who's here in this country. Not that Americans can't commit crimes just as well.
Right. And I think that one of the problems you have with the lack of commitment this administration has shown toward sealing the border. Yes, there's always a bit of a problem. Every administration has dealt with it, but this is on a whole new level. And if you look at just the way that they paroled people into the country, they paroled 22 times as many people per month as the Trump administration did, just waving them into the country, and basically put up a big welcome sign. And when you do that, that's a pull factor. It encourages more and more people to come. And so you weren't getting just the people that you traditionally used to see, which is people from Central and South America. You were seeing Chinese nationalists. You're seeing people from Europe. And last year, 169 terrorists, which is why it is a national security threat. If you know that you apprehended 169 terrorists trying to get across the border, and you know there were 1.7 million gotaways, people that they weren't able to apprehend during the Biden administration, how many of those were people on the terrorist watch list? It's a crisis, and they finally figured it out, but it's too late. They own it.
Well, we actually took our show to Necoclí, Colombia, which is a staging ground to head for the Darien Gap to come up to the United States. And we met people from all over the world, and there were just crowds and crowds and crowds of people, and you felt the chaos and disarray, and you got a real sense of the uncertainty about who's coming into this country. But what I don't understand is that what was the justification in any negotiations why the Biden administration had sort of been at least dragging its feet, in my opinion, on getting anything done about the border all these years?
Really good question. I think, if you talk to Democrats, and I do sometimes, to try and kind of figure out what is in your heads on this. How in any world does this make sense to have just this chaos at the southern border? And part of it is, I think, a lot of Democrats believe that, we're a great country, we ought to be a welcoming country, and we ought to take care of people. The problem is, it's not just people who are coming here for a better life. It's become criminals, it's become gang members, it's become people, like I said, on the terrorist watch list. It's a national security threat. If people think you have a porous border, essentially we do. It's basically an open border. and people are coming across at will. And we're seeing the effects of that not just in border states, but all across the country. And I think what finally got the Biden administration's attention is what was happening in the big cities. So New York and Chicago, now they got all these people that are trying to process, and they're having to take services away from people, citizens in their own states. You heard the mayor of New York say, we're going to shut down libraries, we're going to reduce police force, we're going to have to, do something about cutting back on education in schools. That has a real impact, not just in Texas and Arizona and in border states, but all across the country, including in some of our more populated areas where you're just seeing the adverse impacts of an open border.
I don't think that the American people are not welcoming those who want a secure border. I think Americans welcome immigrants to this country. I think the question of those who want a more secure border is simply we just don't know who's here. We want to welcome people. Right. We want to know who they are, though, which is not such an outlandish request.
No, and I come from I'm one generation removed from immigrant. My grandfather and great uncle came here from Norway. And America is a nation of immigrants, but we are fundamentally a nation of laws, and people have to follow the law. And I'm all for, we've got a nation that's made up of people who came here from other places around the world. We've been a welcoming nation, but we're a nation that, yes, we want to know who's here, and we want you to follow our laws to get here. And there are ways you can get into this country legally. What the Biden administration has countenanced is just a massive influx of people illegally, and somehow felt that it was okay to bless that. And that to me is it's just a complete abdication and dereliction of duty.
You talk about the cities, the sanctuary cities. You've got New York, Chicago. You've got these cities that are now feeling very much burdened, the citizens and the taxpayers of these cities, the sanctuary cities. That in some ways, sanctuary cities are usurping the power of the federal government in terms of immigration laws. Are you going to do anything about that? Or is that of concern? Or is that, are the cities allowed to do that as they wish?
No, they shouldn't be allowed to do that. And I think that that's something that Congress needs to have a role and a voice in. This administration clearly isn't doing anything about it. And if we get the majority in the Senate and hopefully get a Republican president, those are some of the things that I think that we'll be able to change. But you do have a very permissive policy with some of those cities around this country where people come in and they're and I'm like, if you're going to come across the border illegally, and I have great sympathy for the governor of Texas, who sometimes sends some of these people who are coming here illegally to these sanctuary cities just to give them a firsthand taste and experience of what people in border states are experiencing. And so the sanctuary city issue is, to me, again, crazy. And I think the sanctuary cities are figuring that out. If you look at what the mayor of Chicago, the mayor of New York, and places like that are saying, they get it now.
Well, you don't have to be a great visionary to know that something's going to break.
Right.
When you go into an airport and see people sleeping in the airports because they have no place to go and they're from other countries, and you go into some of our poorer neighborhoods where we're not taking care of people who've been here in the United States who are American citizens, at some point there's going to be, things are going to break. And it's not, you don't have to be a great visionary to realize that we're in big trouble. And ultimately these cities they're going to come to you for money.
Yeah. And they do. And there are, in every bill that we process around here, Chuck Schumer, for example, because of New York City, is always trying to add money in for sanctuary cities and to deal with a migrant crisis. And the way you stop the migrant crisis and the issue that they're dealing with in a lot of these cities is you seal the border. Control the border, know who's coming into the country, and have some operational control. Ronald Reagan used to say, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but a country that can't control its borders can't control its destiny. And that's what it feels like in America today. It feels very chaotic. It feels like we're sort of a nation in crisis because we have so many people coming into this country who we have no idea who they are, in many cases what their intentions are for being here. And like I said, some people come here for the obvious reasons. They want to get a better life for their families. But there are a lot of malign characters with malign intentions who are coming across the border now.